Hello, hello. Today we're going to talk about the solo leveling challenger deck, and in particular, I want to go through all the cards and give them sort of some loose grades, some first impressions. This video should be going live some hours after the cards are actually previewed to give you time to look over the cards for yourself. If you haven't yet, go check out any number of other content creators. There's a bunch of people doing the previews. So I figured rather than being in the middle of that, I'd just make a video expressly focused on talking about the cards, how good I think they are or are not, and just go about it that way. So I've got it sorted here into heavy play, some play, and niche play, and in between those I've got like high impact and low impact, because sometimes like a staple spam will see a ton of play and not really be impactful, you know what I mean? So I've got, these are sort of the categories I'm going with here, and then of course we have the coaster category at the bottom where at least competitively, the card just doesn't seem relevant. And, for the characters, it'll be a little bit different. The image quality on these is a little degraded from, my bringing them from the assets that I was given into TTS, but you've presumably already seen the cards already, so that's not too big of a deal. So let's just get straight underway with Sung Jinwoo, S-Rank Hunter. I'm not going to read all the cards aloud. He gets to level up at the end of each of his turns at the cost of an XP card. And if you've seen the skill tree, you can see it takes a while before Sung Jinwoo gets to the point where he's something you would call a respectable character in the current meta. Probably about 4 turns, probably when you get that echo effect, you start to look at him and think, okay, this character's probably pretty good at this point. But, man, that means it's not until his 5th turn, offensively, that he gets to do his thing. And right now, the meta's just not shaped to allow for that. There's a lot of decks that are, becoming very, very hard to beat, if not outright winning the game as soon as turn 3 or very often turn 4. So a character that doesn't even become decent until turn 5, decent in, current power level perspectives, presumably just isn't going to cut it. Now, we'll see what they do going into rotation. There's a possibility that they hit a bunch of the outliers, after Nationals and Worlds, and the format comes back to him a little bit. Because the nice thing about him is if you do get all the way through this skill tree, if you get to that Ruler's Authority ability, just going and scooping what will very often be attacks out of your removed from game pile and just grabbing an attack and grabbing an attack and grabbing an attack every time you play one is a very, very strong ability. So, the upside is if you can make it all the way through, if you can, last to turn 6, turn 7, turn 8, then you have a very high chance of winning the game. That's just not a pace that's very good right now. So I'm going to put him in niche play because, some people will still play him, if it's their favorite anime or one of their favorite animes, one of their favorite characters. So, I just watched it this past week. It's pretty good. So, he'll show up a little bit, at least early on. Or if people just really like the IP, he's the only character from it right now. But I think the meta would have to change a lot for him to actually be good. All right, going through the foundations. A lot of these are going to be kind of Jinwoo only. Serpent Scramble is certainly one of them. You're not playing this card unless you really need that XP keyword. And it's kind of just a blank spam. So, certainly niche play, low impact. Can I? Alright. So I get rid of the chat box. I was complaining when I moved cards around. Next up is Loot Box. Some people are really excited about this card. I'm pretty down on it. 2/4 E-flip draw a card would not see play, and 2/4 E-flip draw a card and get +1 to a check at some point doesn't seem better enough. If you were allowed to keep the foundation, if drawing the card was optional, I'd be a lot more excited about this. But because it's basically just going to be +1 to a check, or, if you're paying destroy costs, then, okay, then you have to flip it for a destroy trigger, which is okay, but ultimately I don't think this is going to make it into very many decks outside of Jinwoo himself. He'll like it. I think it'll be pretty nice for him. So I'll go ahead and put it into high impact, but probably not in too many other places. Leveling Strength, on the other hand, just a 1/5 +2 low spam that commits for 2 damage is, plenty universal enough. It's not uncommon at all for decks to just be looking for spam with low blocks that do anything useful, and committing for damage is definitely quite useful. So I think we'll see this one a lot. Pretty much any deck that's looking for a spam low block or just a little more damage, it's going to do especially after rotation, is going to do more than what a lot of other spams are doing. So I think leveling strength is pretty good. Item menu, another Jinwoo only. He's the only character I think that can play this that removes cards from his hand on face. I think there's like 1 or 2 attacks that do it if you can bridge the attune thing, but that's not really pertinent. It's a little disappointing that it's only removed from your hand as a spam foundation that might be sitting in his stage that he'd like to remove to get the level up. And drawing the card at like the end of your turn, a blind card is just okay, but it's fine. He'll play it, but it won't be a huge deal. Improving skills, another one, a 2/5 that does the same thing that 1/5 spams do, is not very exciting for anybody unless you need that XP keyword. The response again is basically Jinwoo only. This card might not even make the cut in a lot of Jinwoo decks. They're going to be trying to figure out exactly how many XP cards they actually need, so this may be coaster tier, but I'll put it into niche low impact. Dungeoneering armor is in fact a coaster. This is just not a good rate for a damage reduction card compared to the other ones that are available. Maybe that armor keyword means something, when Critical Role comes out, maybe there's somebody that keys off of that in some way, but until we see something like that, this card is, it's fine in the challenger deck. It's not like it does absolutely nothing, but it's never going to make a constructed cut, I don't think. Fateful Decision, however, for some reason not an XP card. Maybe this art might not be about Jinwoo, actually. I think this is a different character. So that's probably why it's not an XP card. But it is definitely a good one. 1/5s that commit to -2 speed are pretty baseline playable. You're never thrilled to put them in your deck. Having the backup ability to get Breaker 1, if the speed's not useful, the Breaker 1 could be useful. So it's a pretty good split of abilities. I think a lot of decks will sometimes, play a couple copies of a -2 speed foundation to shore out their spam count, and any deck that has access to this one, this is probably going to be the -2 speed of choice that's going to show up and see play. So I think we'll see this one a pretty healthy amount. Double Dungeon. People a little down on this card because it stops you from leveling up again during the turn, which, it would be nice if your 3/5 unique foundation accelerated your clock overall. But what it does do, which is kind of nice, is it lets you level up mid-turn so you can hit that Echo ability or the Ruler's Authority ability 1 turn sooner in the middle of an attack string, which I think is going to be quite relevant and certainly well worth running for Jinwoo. But again, pretty literally Jinwoo only, unless we see anything else with the level up mechanic at some point. Timely Recovery. Again, a 2/5 that blows up for 2 health has another remove from hand ability that is again Jinwoo only. Could only possibly see play in Jinwoo. Sort of like supporting skills. This one's probably even more likely to get cut than supporting skills is if you're going to cut an XP foundations from your deck. Because just, 2 health is fine, but the value of that's pretty murky, whereas the value of being able to blow up foundations and get some speed on your moves that are, if nothing else, getting a bunch of ascending damage has a little more value than what this is doing. So, Jinwoo only, low impact might be a coaster. And this is kind of going to be one of the problems that Jinwoo has, aside from just his pacing, is that out of the XP foundations, only one of them is a card you might play if you're not Jinwoo. And granted, some of those are because they have these specific remove from hand triggers and that sort of thing, but it's a pretty awkward place to be in constructed-wise. I'm sure as a challenger deck, these cards aren't like awful cards from a challenger limited type of standpoint, but for constructed, his foundation quality is definitely going to lag behind a little bit from having to run, some number of these that you don't necessarily really want to be running. But now we get to the attacks, and this is where a lot of the cool parts of this deck are. So, first of all, we have World's Weakest Hunter. This is the 5/3 that can draw up to 3 cards on hit. People are pretty happy to pay a 2 check to play Tasty Riff. This, while it doesn't always draw 3 cards, you have a bit of a hoop to jump through. It is otherwise very similarly shaped. 5 speed, if it hits, you draw 3 cards. This one has EX you can pour into it, which is pretty cool. It has the weapon keyword, which is arguably, more relevant than the keywords that are in Tasty Riff, I think. I don't remember what keywords are in Tasty Riff, but it's a 3 check and not even a 2 check, so, the Needing to have removed cards is a bit of a limitation, but I think any deck that meets that hurdle is probably going to try to play it. At the very least, they're going to give it a shot, and it's going to be pretty strong for them, I would assume. Wolf Assassin. This is the 5/3 that can pick up an XP Foundation. So chances are, we just went over the quality of the XP Foundations. Only Jinwoo is actually going to be running them to any meaningful degree, so this kind of makes it a Jinwoo only card. Not sure if it'll make the cut when you have 4 copies of all the attacks and you get to start cutting them from your deck. This might be the one that goes. Maybe they play a couple. This is pretty close, if not... Actually, I'm just going to put it in coaster tier. I don't see how you don't just play 4x of the other 2 5 diffs and some number of 4s in your Jinwoo constructed decks if you're going to be running a bunch of attacks with his face on it, but... it's not even necessarily a bad effect. It's just that the XP Foundations aren't good, right? If there were, better ones to be grabbing, I'll put it in low, maybe. Because Jinwoo's still, like, pretty fine to grab item menu, and this is kind of a 5/5 that sort of draws a card. I'm a little doubtful, though. I'll expect those to get cut. Killing Intent. This is a 4 low 5 stun one that can seal a foundation. It should surprise nobody that I think this card's pretty good. It is definitely a very diet version of Chimera Kraken, but Chimera Kraken is a heck of a card. And so even a diet Chimera Kraken that has the weapon keyword, has relevant keywords, has the low zone, could see play in a low zone type spam deck. I think this will show up here and there and be very good when it does. I am pretty high on Wolfwood using cards from this solo leveling deck. He's getting a lot of stuff here. If he's a casino list, he can use this World's Weakest Hunter too. There's some other cards here that are good for him. That's definitely one of the decks I'm going to look to build once this is out, is to see what Wolfwood can do when he gets his hand on some of these cards, and this would go right into that. So Killing Intent, pretty good. It kind of requires you to be playing a deck that cares about the keywords for it to make the cut, I would assume. But if you do, and plenty of decks care about Fury and or Weapon, should be a pretty interesting option for you. Venom Fang Dagger. This is a very weird one. This is the 3 low 3 that if it hits, your next weapon attacks specifically, so you have to be on the weapon theme, and the next weapon gets damage equal to Venom Fang's current damage, whatever you've managed to make it. So it's like you double up on damage pumps. There's some interesting applications. You think of a deck like Toga. Here's my 6 low 5 with stun 1 if you decide you're just going to take my one big move while there's going to be a second big move. So it's interesting for a character like that. The aforementioned Wolfwood might be interested in this if it's on like a low zone spam. Or this could be your low attack mix-up. Obviously you have to be a character that is both weapon themed, and if not putting damage on all of your moves, at least you're happy, one where you're happy to put damage on this one. So pretty niche for sure, but could be kind of spicy when it shows up. So I'm going to put it in niche play, but high impact. Grasp for Survival is an interesting one. So it's just a 4 damage throw on its face, and hey, sometimes you play those, right? Sometimes you just want to have a throw in your deck for the sake of having your throw in your deck and making the momentum. And the special ability in this one doesn't seem too exciting. Up front, if you block with your +3 mid, you gain 2 health, but gaining 2 health on block can be sneaky good sometimes. So I think if people try this out, they're gonna feel a little bit better about it than they did when they put the card in the deck. But still, at the end of the day, it's a 4 diff throw that you're just playing because you want a 4 diff throw, and you're gonna have other options for that. But I think it'll show up here and there, so I'll put it in niche play, but some fairly low impact. And notice that, like, I could probably have extra categories here for niche play versus character only, because like these two could see play in other characters, whereas all the rest of these are pretty much just Jinwoo only. So we'll put a little bit of a space there, I guess. Next one's Enough of This. This is the Frenzy attack, the really cute blitz that makes it not count towards progressive to play Foundations. That is cool. I don't think it is worth playing a subpar statted attack to do that. And I think they're being very conservative with Frenzy early on. I think if you think of Frenzy as, maybe this attack gets +2/+2, or if it's like a combo enhanced +2/+2 if they've blocked twice, and your 3 mid 4 that can be a 5 mid 6 conditionally just isn't that exciting at the end of the day. It doesn't even get to have weapon, it's just a Fury. Looking at it, which means that it doesn't even work in Jinwoo. It doesn't use his critical attack. You can't give it Echo. It's not even really there's a throw like that too. So yeah, I don't think Jinwoo's running this. There could be some weird wacky deck where you're really making use of that progressive element in some way. But unless you feel really, really good about counting up that frenzy to like 3 or 4 or 5, I don't think this becomes playable. I think this one's probably just a coaster. Cool art aside, it is a pretty nice shot. Clash with the Blood Red is, if people haven't processed this yet, this is probably the, well, World's Weakest Hunter is a heck of a card, but this is probably the best general purpose card in this deck. So the Blitz is pretty complicated. It does this thing where both players are revealing the top cards of their deck, and you're comparing values, and you're doing a bunch of stuff. The actual outcome of this is kind of like destined for mainstream success from the first MHA set, which was a spam foundation that saw tons and tons of play. But basically, more often than not, what's going to happen here is you're both going to reveal the top card of your deck. And if your card is a foundation, you know, presumably a 5 check if you're not running any 4s, then you're going to get to leave that on top. You're going to get to scout that good check. It's sitting on top of your deck. You know what you're going to check next, and your opponent stuns too. Right, so it's a 5/5/5 stun 2 that just scouted your next check. If you reveal an attack, then chances are, right, your opponent didn't reveal an attack. There's a 1 in 9 chance that you both reveal an attack and you're kind of sad about it. But if you reveal an attack, chances are you're going to draw it. And your rival's going to ditch the nice check off the top of their deck. So very much like Destin, you're going to reveal a top card of your deck. Most of the time it's a foundation, it's going to stay. Most of the time if it's an attack, you're going to get to draw it. You know, that can get, you know, flubbed up. They have 6 checks or whatever, but that's a pretty nice effect to have on your 5/5/5. That's probably, you know, it's going to be a stun 2 a lot of the time, and if it's not stunning them 2, then it's drawing you an attack. So I think this is quite good. 5/3, you know, competition for space index is pretty rough. All symbol attuned, you know, is at least a separate attunement symbol than a lot of the Attack on Titan cards, so it has a little bit more of a chance to see play perhaps on that. But I suspect we probably won't quite get to see it everywhere. I could be wrong, though. I could imagine this ending up being everywhere, but I'm going to put it in some play high impact for now. Just because there's so many other good 5-diffs that you could be running, but this is definitely in the mix, I think. Determined Cut. 4/3, the Weapon XP Powerful 3. This is the funny, they burn if they play an enhanced response. This is a tricky one to rate. I sort of wish there's an old 3-diff that this is not harkening back to, because the designer would have to be more of a boomer than I assume that they were in order to be harkening back to the card I'm thinking of. But, you know, if you're trying to think of that as a, like, if it burns them for 2, are you happy to play a 4/3 Powerful 3? Kind of. I mean, Powerful 3 is fine, but I think at the end of the day, this isn't going to make very many cuts, as it were, pun somewhat intended. But it's an interesting card, probably not worth sideboarding. Jinwoo certainly happy to have an XP attack they can pick up, you know, gives them the momentum dump. Could be the attack that he plus 3 speed on and then plays the powerful. So it's pretty nice for him, but I don't know if it's going to see much play elsewhere. Hunter's Dagger, the ultra rare asset, the weapon that Jinwoo makes a lot of use of during the series, is unfortunately, I think, a coaster. You know, this is the worst Knots Flask on the face of the earth, and Knots Flask is an awfully good card, but commit for a very bad version of +3 damage that it can't even kill them actually, but it might deal its 3 damage eventually. And if you manage to do it twice with the same dagger, then it's even more eventually before you actually get your payoff. You know, maybe there's some, you know, there's going to be people that try to mad scientist stuff to do with giving the weapon trait to an attack, but outside of that, the actual base rate on this card is just bad. I mean, maybe at some point there's something else that references bleed counters that gets to make use of this or something, but with the card pool we have right now, this card is unfortunately just very, very not good. And the last card we have is Teleportation Stone. This is the on block. This is basically turn any block into airy smiles. You could think of it as an on block learning the standards. Reference a different card. Learning the standards because it forces you to take an attack winds up seeing less play than it might see otherwise. The fact that you get to block and then use this ability is pretty good. That said, it's an asset. It's a 3-diff. Those things are tight on space. So I think ultimately this is going to be kind of a niche role. People will play it if they feel like there's a meta necessity where this really trips up a deck enough to warrant playing the 3-diff asset that blows up. Think of ultra compressed weights that sometimes shows up and sees some play. We'll put it on this side. Not an XP, so it's not like guaranteed for Jinwoo to be playing it or anything, but we'll see it here and there. The card's not too bad, but probably a little too costly to see play super often. And that's going to wrap it up for my overview of the solo leveling challenger deck. So as you can see here, we've definitely got some very nice attacks that aren't like going to be universal staples everywhere, but they're going to be quite good where they do see play, I think. That's probably the main attraction of the deck, as well as a couple very nice spams. So if you're buying the deck for Constructed, I think there's certainly enough here to warrant it. And we don't know what Critical Role is going to bring. We don't know if there's going to be maybe a second solo leveling deck later down the line where some of these other cards might be more useful than they seem right now. Got a couple nice, decent niche role players as well. I would certainly try Venom Fang Dagger in that Wolfwood deck off the top of my head. It's at least going to be in the 100 card version of that list, and we'll see what happens. So yeah, hope you like this. Let me know what you think about these divisions. If you think I'm super wrong on one of these, Jinwoo only cards that you think is, probably somebody's going to be in the comments telling me that loot box is the best thing ever, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm pretty cynical about it. But yeah, until next time, have a good night.